What happens when a man who has only ever known how to destroy is given something to protect? A man whose knuckles are scarred from 100 brawls, whose soul is tattooed with 1,000 regrets, stops his thundering beast of a machine on the edge of hell itself. He finds a little girl, broken and bleeding, whispering a prayer that sounds like his own damnation. Please don't hurt me. This man, known as Wreck for the chaos he leaves in his wake, does something next that shatters his own brutal world. His single act of mercy ignites a firestorm of redemption, a desperate fight for survival, and forges an unthinkable bond that proves even a heart forged in violence can learn to beat for someone else. This leather-clad demon, with a reputation that makes hardened criminals cross the street, becomes the unlikely guardian angel for a terrified child. His response to her plea doesn't just change her world, it cracks open his own petrified soul. What started as a chance encounter on a sun-scorched highway becomes a saga of second chances, of brutal sacrifice, and the terrifying power of love. But what did this monster of a man do that changed everything? Before we peel back the skin on this story, tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. And if you believe in second chances, smash that like button and subscribe, because what's coming next will shake you to your core. The roar of the customized Harley-Davidson, a machine they called Warhorse, was a profane sermon echoing through the empty desolation of Route 666. It was a sound that tore through the blistering New Mexico heat, a mechanical beast screaming against the oppressive silence of the desert. At the handlebars sat Rex Wreck Callahan, a man built of coiled muscle and bad intentions. His hands, calloused and scarred, gripped the chrome, each knuckle a tombstone for a fight someone else had lost. The wind, hot as a dragon's breath, did little to cool the fire in his gut. A fire that had been burning since he'd turned his back on the Vulture Syndicate Motorcycle Club 8 months ago. Life was a purgatory of routine. Coffee as black and bitter as his memories. The greasy air of the garage where he turned wrenches on other people's machines. The suffocating silence of his one-room apartment. A place where the ghosts of his past screamed louder than the passing freight trains. It was an honest living. A concept that felt foreign and ill-fitting, like a priest's collar on a hangman. It kept his hands busy, but it couldn't quiet the accusations that echoed in the hollows of his soul. In his pocket, a faded photograph, creased and soft from years of handling, felt heavier than lead. His own daughter. A ghost he couldn't outrun. He'd lost her not to sickness or accident, but to his own choices. Lost her to the club, to the bottle, to the man he had allowed himself to become. The memory of her small hand slipping from his for the last time was a phantom pain that never subsided. He throttled down, leaning into a long, sweeping curve with the instinct born of 2 decades on 2 wheels. The desert stretched out before him, a canvas of baked earth and skeletal mesquite trees, sentinels guarding a land that God had long since abandoned. This was his church now, these endless ribbons of asphalt where the past was a predator snapping at his heels, and the future was a mercy he didn't deserve. The Vulture Syndicate had been his only family for 17 years. Brothers forged in chrome, blood, and a loyalty so absolute it demanded the sacrifice of one's own soul. But loyalty, Wreck had discovered, was a currency spent by the powerful on the souls of the weak. The breaking point had been an order from Silas Cobra Vance, the club's charismatic and utterly ruthless president. An order to send a message to a rival, a message to be delivered with fire and pain to a man's home, with his wife and child sleeping in their beds upstairs. For the first time, Wreck had said no. Walking away hadn't been an option. It had been an escape. They hadn't killed him. Cobra had respected Rex's legendary status as an enforcer too much for a simple bullet to the head. Instead, they'd given him a depatching, a ritual beating that left him with 3 broken ribs, a shattered collarbone, and a life expectancy measured in days. The price of his freedom was exile, a constant gnawing paranoia that every shadow held a familiar face. Every engine roar was a harbinger of his past catching up. Warhorse's engine sputtered as he crested a low rise, and that's when the tableau of hell slid into view. Black slashes of rubber scarred the asphalt in a violent, chaotic ballet, leading to a minivan that looked like a crumpled beer can wrapped around a power pole. A thin plume of steam hissed from the mangled hood, and the driver's side door hung open, twisted and grotesque. Rec pulled over, his steel-toed boots crunching on the gravel shoulder. His military training, buried under years of biker law, surged to the surface. Scan for threats, assess casualties. But the biker, the exile, screamed at him to keep riding. This wasn't his problem. Involvement meant cops, questions, attention he couldn't afford. Then he heard it. A sound so small it was almost lost in the hiss of the dying engine. A voice like the flutter of a moth's wings against his heart. "Please, don't hurt me. I can't move." She was maybe 7 years old, a tiny thing with hair like spun midnight, matted with dust and a terrifying slick of crimson. Her sundress was torn, her small body sprawled 15 feet from the wreckage, likely thrown clear. Her right leg was bent at an angle that screamed fracture, a detail his old Army medic training registered with a cold, professional dread. But it was her eyes, wide, terrified, the color of rich chocolate, that stopped his heart. They tracked his approach with the primal fear of a creature that knows the world is full of teeth. "Hey now, little bird." Rex's voice was a gravelly rumble, a sound he hadn't used with such softness in a decade, a voice he thought he'd buried along with his daughter. He dropped to one knee, his massive, tattooed frame seeming to shrink as he made himself smaller, less threatening. "I'm not going to hurt you. My name's Rex. I'm here to help." The little girl's breathing was a shallow, frantic rhythm. Her face was a mask of pale shock beneath the grime. "Mommy," she whispered, a single word that ripped through Rex's carefully constructed armor. He glanced at the minivan. No movement, no sound but the ticking of hot metal and the whisper of the wind. His throat went tight. He knew that silence. He'd seen it in the scorched Humvees outside Fallujah. Some fights were lost before the cavalry ever arrived. "Let's just worry about you for a minute, okay?" He shrugged off his heavy leather cut, the Vulture Syndicate patch on the back, a stark reminder of who he was, and gently draped it over her. His arms, covered in a tapestry of ink, telling tales of violence and loss, were shockingly gentle. "Can you tell me your name?" "Mia." Her voice was a little stronger. He took it as a good sign. "My leg, it hurts so much." "I know it does, Mia. I'm going to call for help, and I'm going to sit right here with you until they get here. How does that sound?" For the first time, a flicker of something other than terror crossed her face. It looked almost like trust. Rec pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the 911 icon as he made a choice that would send his old life and his fragile new one on a collision course. He was getting involved, and for a man like him, getting involved was the most dangerous thing in the world. Rec knelt beside Mia, his body a bulwark against the relentless sun. He moved with the slow, deliberate care of a bomb disposal expert, every motion calibrated to minimize her fear. The faded photo in his wallet seemed to burn through the leather, a constant, searing reminder of another little girl, another promise he had failed to keep. "I need to check you over, Mia. I'm going to be real gentle, but you got to tell me if anything hurts more when I touch it, all right?" His voice was a strange cocktail of battlefield authority, and a tenderness that felt alien on his own tongue. Mia gave a small, jerky nod, her tiny hand clutching the edge of his leather vest. His eyes, trained long ago in the bloody chaos of an aid station, performed a rapid, methodical assessment. The right leg was an obvious compound fracture. The way she protected her left side suggested cracked ribs, but her pupils were even and reactive, her speech was lucid, and she was tracking his every move. Good signs. "You know, Mia," he said, his hands probing gently around the edges of her injuries. "I used to be a soldier. We learned how to patch people up when they got hurt. I'm going to take real good care of you till the doctors arrive." The child's eyes widened, a spark of awe cutting through the pain. "A real soldier? Did you fight monsters?" A ghost of a smile touched Rek's lips, the first genuine one in months. "Sometimes. But the best part was helping people, just like I'm helping you now." He pulled out his phone, dialing 911 with a thumb that bore a faded skull tattoo. "I'm calling for an ambulance. Then you and me, we're gonna wait right here together. Sound like a plan?" "Okay," she whispered, her voice gaining a bit of strength. Then she asked the question that hit him like a physical blow, a ricochet from the past that lodged deep in his chest. "Will you stay with me?" 5 years ago. A hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and despair. Another little girl, his little girl, had asked him the exact same thing. He'd promised he'd be back from a club run before she fell asleep. But the run went long, the beer flowed, and by the time he'd stumbled home, the call had already come. His daughter Lily had died asking for her daddy, and he'd been 1,000 miles away playing outlaw while his whole world burned down. "Yes," he said, the single word carrying the crushing weight of 1,000 broken promises and one new, unbreakable vow. "I'll stay right here with you." The 911 operator's voice was a tinny, professional calm on the other end as Rek relayed their location, Mia's condition, and the status of the vehicle. His report was clear, concise, military-grade information that would give the first responders a head start. He kept one large hand resting gently on Mia's shoulder, a solid anchor in her terrifying new reality. "They're coming, little bird. Be here in 10 minutes. Rek pocketed the phone. "Want to tell me what you're learning in school? What grade are you in?" "Second grade," Mia said, the conversation a welcome distraction. "Mrs. Gable is my teacher. She has a pet lizard named Pascal, and she lets us feed him crickets if we finish our math." Are you really going to stay?" she asked again, needing the reassurance. Rek nodded, the sincerity of it surprising even him. "I promise. You know what? I got something that might make you feel a little braver." He reached into his wallet, his fingers finding the worn photograph he'd carried like a penance for 5 years. Lily grinned back at him, a gap-toothed 7-year-old smile frozen in time. "This is my little girl, Lily." His voice hitched, but he pushed through the pain. "She was about your age here. She always told me that when you're scared, it helps to think about something that makes you super happy. Can you think of one thing that makes you really happy?" Mia considered this with the gravity of a philosopher. "My Aunt Evie. And puppy videos on the internet. And when Aunt Evie makes pancakes shaped like dinosaurs." Her face clouded. "But Aunt Evie's at the hospital. She's a doctor. She won't know I'm here." "We'll make sure she knows," Rek assured her, a new piece of the puzzle clicking into place. An aunt, a doctor. Where were her parents? The silence from the minivan provided the grim, unspoken answer. "The doctors will call her for you." In the distance, the wail of a siren began to slice through the desert air. Rek felt a strange tug-of-war in his chest, relief that help was coming, and a fierce, possessive reluctance to hand over his charge. This little girl had awakened a part of him he thought had died with Lily. "I hear them," Mia said, her grip on his vest tightening. "That's the good news. They're gonna take great care of you." Rek shifted his body slightly, shielding her from the dust kicked up by the approaching vehicles. "And remember what I promised. I'm staying with you. If they'll let me, I'm riding with you all the way to the hospital." The siren's scream became deafening as an ambulance, followed by a county sheriff's cruiser, rounded the bend. Rek braced himself. He knew the drill. The questions, the suspicion, the immediate judgment that a man who looked like him could only be a predator. But as the paramedics jogged toward them, his focus remained locked on Mia. "See? Help is here, just like I promised." The paramedics were a whirlwind of practiced efficiency, their professional surprise obvious when Rek gave them a concise, accurate assessment of Mia's injuries. The lead medic, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor named Carla, raised an eyebrow. "You've had medical training?" she asked, her team already working to stabilize Mia. "Army medic, 1st Cavalry," Rek said, stepping back to give them space but never taking his eyes off Mia. "Probable compound fracture of the right tibia and fibula, suspected hairline fractures on ribs 3 and 4, left side. No visible signs of head trauma, pupils are equal and reactive." Carla nodded, impressed. "Good work. You probably saved her from a more severe injury by keeping her still." She smiled down at Mia. "Hey there, sweet pea. We're going to take you for a little ride, okay?" Mia's terrified eyes found Rek. Is Mr. Rex coming?" The sheriff's deputy, a man named Miller with a sun-etched face and a gaze that missed nothing, stepped forward. His eyes lingered on Rek's tattoos, the ghost of the Vulture Syndicate patch still visible on his cut. "I'm gonna need a statement from you, sir," Miller said, his tone professional but laced with suspicion. "Your name?" "Rex Callahan." He kept his voice even, fighting the old instinct to be defiant in the face of authority. "Any relation to the victim?" "No, just found her." Rek watched them load Mia into the ambulance. "Can I ride with her? The kid's scared." Miller's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "That's up to the medics. I'll need to talk to you more at the hospital after I process the scene." Carla overheard and made a field decision. "She's asking for him, and a calm patient is a stable patient. Get in, but stay out of our way." Rek climbed into the back of the ambulance, settling on the bench seat. Mia reached out a small, trembling hand. He took it, his massive, scarred fingers dwarfing hers. "See? Told you I'd stay." The ride to Desert View General was a chaotic blur of beeping monitors and medical jargon. Rek found himself flashing back to another ambulance, another desperate race against time, only to arrive and find he was too late. Lily had died alone, asking for a father who was busy being a biker. At the hospital, the controlled mayhem of the ER swallowed Mia whole. She vanished behind a set of swinging doors marked Trauma, authorized personnel only, leaving Rek stranded in a waiting room that reeked of stale coffee and quiet desperation. He collapsed into a hard plastic chair, the adrenaline finally draining away, leaving behind a profound exhaustion and the hollow ache of memory. "Excuse me, are you the gentleman who brought Mia in?" A nurse with a kind but weary face approached him. "Yeah, that's me. There's a woman at the front desk. Says she's the child's aunt." Rek looked up. A woman in blue surgical scrubs was rushing toward the information desk, her face a mask of raw panic. She looked like she had run straight from an operating room, her dark hair escaping a messy bun. She was the one. The doctor. Aunt Evie. "Dr. Evelyn Reed," the nurse called out. The woman spun around. "Yes, that's me. Where is she?" Is my niece okay?" Rec watched from his corner as Evelyn, Evie, was barraged with information, her hands shaking as she signed a clipboard of consent forms. When her frantic eyes finally swept the waiting room and landed on him, her expression hardened into a mixture of confusion and suspicion. "You," she said, her voice sharp. "You're the one who found her." Rex stood, suddenly hyper-aware of how he must look to this clean, professional woman. 6'4" of dusty leather, road grime, and questionable life choices. A wild, graying beard and eyes that had seen too much. "Yes, ma'am," he said. He realized he was still clutching a small, stuffed bunny that must have been near Mia on the road. She was asking for this. I think it's hers." Evelyn's hostility faltered as she took the bunny, her fingers closing around it like a holy relic. "Barnaby," she whispered. "She never sleeps without him." She looked at Rec again, her gaze more searching this time. "The paramedic said you stayed with her, that you rode in the ambulance." "She was scared," Rec said simply. "Seemed like the right thing to do." "And you are?" "Rex Callahan." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "The biker. Deputy Miller mentioned you." She paused, as if weighing her next words. "He also said Mia's injuries could have been a lot worse. He said someone with medical training kept her stable." Rec just shrugged, uncomfortable under the praise. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Evelyn said, her voice quiet but firm. "They wouldn't have. Thank you." The raw, simple gratitude struck Rec with more force than any punch he'd ever taken. He gave a single, curt nod and turned to leave. His job was done. The girl was safe. It was time for him to disappear back into the shadows. But as he walked toward the automatic doors, he heard Mia's faint voice from behind the curtain, crying out, asking for Mr. Rex. Each step he took away from that sound felt like a betrayal, an echo of the day he'd failed Lily, abandoning her all over again. The dive bar on the edge of town was called the Last Chance Saloon, a fitting name for a place that smelled of stale beer and regret. Rec nursed a whiskey, the amber liquid failing to drown the images replaying in his mind, Mia's terrified eyes, the twisted metal of the van, Lily's gap-toothed smile in the photograph. Past and present were bleeding together into an agonizing blur. "Another?" the bartender grunted, a man whose face was a road map of bad decisions. "Better not," Rec mumbled, pulling a crumpled 20 from his jeans. As he did, the small, stuffed bunny, Barnaby, tumbled out of his vest pocket and landed on the sticky floor. He stared at it. Its button eyes seemed to accuse him, to judge him for walking away, for abandoning another little girl who had asked him to stay. That goddamn bunny changed everything. He slapped the 20 on the bar and strode out the door, Lily's voice a ghostly echo in his ears. "Daddy, you promised you'd be back." The ride back to Desert View General was fueled by a different kind of urgency. Not duty, but purpose. When he walked back through those automatic doors, clutching the stuffed animal, he didn't feel like an intruder anymore. He felt like a man on a mission. The night nurse recognized him. "Mr. Callahan, she's been asking for you. They just moved her to a room, 314. Rec's gut clenched. "She all right?" "Stable, fractured leg just like you assessed. But no internal bleeding. She's a lucky little girl. You finding her when you did—" The nurse's voice was warm. "She keeps talking about the soldier man who stayed with her." Room 314 was quiet and dim, the only sounds the soft, rhythmic beeping of a monitor. Mia lay in the oversized hospital bed, her right leg encased in a bright blue cast. She looked impossibly fragile, but her eyes flew open and lit up when she saw him standing in the doorway. "Mr. Rex, you came back." "Of course I did," Rec rumbled, his voice thick. You forgot your partner here. He held up Barnaby. Mia's face transformed, pure joy eclipsing the pain. Barnaby, I thought he was lost forever. She hugged the bunny tight, then looked up at Rec, her expression deadly serious. Are you going to leave again? The question landed with the force of a battering ram. Rec eased himself into the uncomfortable visitor's chair, his large body feeling clumsy and out of place. Not if you don't want me to. I don't, she said with the unshakable certainty of a child. Aunt Evie had to go back to work. She has to take care of all the other sick people. She can't stay. Something in her tone, a profound sadness, made Rec lean in. Mia, where are your mom and dad? Mia's face fell, and she hugged Barnaby tighter. They went to heaven, she whispered, in a car crash, like me. But they didn't wake up. Her voice dropped even lower. Aunt Evie says it wasn't my fault, but sometimes I think maybe it was. Rec felt the air leave his lungs. Why in the world would you think that, little bird? We were driving to come see me get my reading award at school. If I hadn't gotten the award, they wouldn't have been on that road. Tears welled in her eyes and began to trace clean paths through the grime on her cheeks. And now Aunt Evie has to take care of me all by herself. But she's sad all the time. I heard her on the phone. She said she doesn't know how she's going to do it. The weight of the little girl's guilt was a familiar poison. He'd been mainlining that same brand of self-blame for 5 years, convinced Lily's death was a direct result of his failures. But looking at this brave, broken child, he saw the truth with a clarity that had always eluded him in his own grief. Mia, listen to me very carefully. Rec's voice was gentle but firm, commanding her attention. What happened to your parents was not your fault. Do you hear me? Sometimes awful things just happen. There's no reason, and there's no one to blame. Your parents loved you so much they were driving to see you get an award. That's what parents do. They show up. He leaned closer. And your Aunt Evie, I bet she's scared. Being in charge of someone you love more than anything in the world is the scariest job there is. But being scared doesn't mean she doesn't want you. It just means she loves you so much that the thought of failing you is terrifying. Sometimes grown-ups need help being brave, too. Mia processed this, her young mind grappling with the complex emotions of adults. You think she really wants me? I think you're her whole world, Rec said, the words feeling truer than anything he'd said in years. He hesitated, then took a leap he never thought he'd take. Would it help if I talked to her? Maybe I could help out. Sometimes. Mia's eyes widened, a fragile hope dawning in them. You would do that? But you're a stranger. Rec reached out and gently adjusted Barnaby's floppy ear. Sometimes, little bird, the best families are the ones we build ourselves. The sound of footsteps in the hall made them both look up. Evelyn stood in the doorway, still in her scrubs, her face etched with exhaustion. Her expression softened as she saw Rec sitting by Mia's bed, a giant, tattooed guardian watching over her niece. Mr. Rex brought Barnaby back, Mia announced, her voice filled with pride. And he said he's going to help us. Evelyn's tired eyes met Rex over the hospital bed. A silent, profound question passed between them. Rex stood slowly, the enormity of the promise he was making settling over him like a physical weight. If you'll have me, he said, his voice a low rumble. And in that moment, in the sterile quiet of that hospital room, something new and terrifying and beautiful began to take root. Okay, let's pause right there. A man who ran from all responsibility is now offering to take on the biggest one of his life. Do you think he's doing it for the right reasons? Is it about redemption for his past, or is it genuinely about this little girl? Let me know your gut reaction in the comments. And if you're hooked, you know what to do. The story is about to get a whole lot more complicated. The official envelope from Child and Family Services lay on Evelyn's kitchen table like an unexploded bomb. She stared at the sterile, bureaucratic letterhead, her hands shaking so badly she could barely read the words. At the other end of the table, Mia was diligently coloring, her casted leg propped on a spare chair, her focus entirely on keeping her purple crayon within the lines of a dragon's wing. "What's that letter say, Aunt Evie?" Mia asked, not looking up. Evelyn swallowed, forcing a calmness into her voice she didn't feel. "Oh, just some paperwork, sweetie. Grown-up stuff." But it was a nightmare. A formal case review, triggered automatically by the accident and Mia's subsequent hospitalization. It was a cold, impersonal inquiry into her life. Her financial stability as a single guardian, her demanding work schedule as a resident physician, her ability to provide adequate care for a child now classified as having special medical needs. The subtext was a dagger to her heart. "Prove you are sufficient, Dr. Reed, or we will find someone who is." A knock at the door made her jump. It was 6 p.m. Exactly. Rex. He had shown up every single evening for the past week, a presence as reliable and unsettling as the sunset. Evelyn had been shocked when he'd first offered to help, and even more shocked when he'd actually meant it. Men like him, in her limited experience, were storms that passed through, leaving destruction in their wake. They didn't stick around to help rebuild. "Mr. Rex!" Mia's face exploded with a brilliant smile as he entered, carrying a bag that smelled of pizza, his nightly peace offering. "How's my favorite artist doing?" Rex's large frame seemed to fill her small apartment. Yet he moved with a surprising grace, carefully navigating around Mia's outstretched leg as he settled on the couch. "What's that you're working on?" "A dragon. See? He breathes glitter fire." Mia held up her masterpiece proudly. "Aunt Evie says dragons are symbols of protection." Rex's gaze met Evelyn's over Mia's head, and she knew he saw the fresh stress etched around her eyes. "That is some fine work," he said to Mia. "You have a real steady hand." Evelyn watched them, a war raging inside her. His gentleness with Mia was a balm to her soul, but everything else about him screamed of a life she couldn't comprehend. The hardened look in his eyes, the faded ink that spoke of a violent past, the way he always sat with his back to the wall. Accepting his help felt like inviting a wolf to guard the henhouse, even if that wolf had so far been nothing but kind. "Mia, honey, why don't you go wash up for dinner?" Evelyn said, needing a moment alone with him. As soon as Mia had navigated her way to the bathroom on her crutches, Evelyn slid the envelope across the table. "We have a problem." Rex's expression sobered as he read the document, his jaw tightening. "They're coming after your custody." "Not yet, but they're laying the groundwork to argue that I'm an unsuitable guardian." Evelyn's voice trembled with a rage she couldn't contain. "I work 80 hours a week, Rex. I'm drowning in medical school debt, and now with Mia's hospital bills. What am I supposed to do?" "What do you need?" The question was so simple, so direct, it caught her completely off guard. No platitudes, no empty reassurances, just a practical inquiry. "I need to prove them wrong," she said, the words tumbling out. "I need a bigger apartment in a better school district. I need to hire a specialized nanny for when I'm on call. I need to show I'm financially stable." She let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "I need a miracle." Rex studied the papers again, his finger tracing a line of text. "This evaluation, it's in 2 weeks." "Yes, a caseworker will come. They'll interview Mia. They'll inspect this apartment. They'll review my finances. If they find me lacking." She couldn't bring herself to say the words. "They won't," Rex said, his voice laced with a conviction that startled her. "We won't let them." "We? Rex, I am so grateful for everything, but this is my fight. You don't know what you're getting into. This means background checks. They will dig into your life, and from what little I can guess, you have a life you'd rather keep buried." Rex was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. Finally, he reached into his jacket, pulled out his wallet, and extracted a cashier's check. It was already made out to her, for $25,000. Evelyn stared at it, speechless. I can't take this." "It's not a gift," he said, his voice low. "It's an investment in Mia's future." He placed the check on the table next to the threatening letter. "Use it. First and last month's rent on a new place, a retainer for a lawyer, whatever you need to win this fight." Evelyn looked from the check to his face, her mind reeling. "Why? Why would you do this for us? We're strangers." Mia's return saved him from having to answer. But in that split second before her niece reappeared, Evelyn saw a flicker of raw, ancient pain in his eyes, a pain so profound it was a universe unto itself. "Because," he said softly, turning to help Mia back to the table, "sometimes the people who fight the hardest are the ones who need someone in their corner." As they ate pizza, with Mia chattering about her day, and Rex listening with an almost religious patience, Evelyn found herself truly looking at this man for the first time. The money was a lifeline, a tangible solution to an impossible problem. But accepting it meant tethering her life, and Mia's, to a man whose past was a locked room she was terrified to open. "Mr. Rex," Mia said around a mouthful of cheese, "are you going to stay with us? Until I'm all better?" Rex's gray eyes met Evelyn's again. The question wasn't just Mia's anymore. It was hers, too. Evelyn looked at the letter from social services, at Mia's hopeful, innocent face, and at the check that represented a fighting chance. "Yes," Evelyn heard herself say, the word tasting of surrender and hope. "I think Mr. Rex is going to stay for a while." The block of basswood felt warm and alive in Rex's hands as he worked the carving knife, shaving away thin curls of wood with a practiced, rhythmic motion. The evenings had settled into a new kind of normal. Dinner together, Rex helping Mia with her second-grade homework, and then this quiet time. Mia would watch a movie while Evelyn studied medical journals, and Rex would sit in his corner, carving. His huge, scarred hands, which seemed made for violence, moved with the delicate precision of a surgeon. From her spot on the couch, Mia watched, mesmerized, as a wolf began to emerge from the wood. "How do you make it look so real?" "Practice," Rex rumbled, his focus on the intricate curve of the wolf's snout. "My old man taught me. Said a man's hands should know how to build things, not just break 'em. Said it quiets the noise in your head." "Was your dad a soldier too?" Rex's hands paused. He remembered his father's workshop, the smell of sawdust and varnish, the feel of calloused hands guiding his own. "Nah, he was a carpenter. A damn good one. Built houses. Fixed what was broken." Evelyn looked up from her notes, catching the flicker of old grief in his eyes. In the past few weeks, she had learned to read the subtle weather patterns of his face, the tightening of his jaw, the careful way he skirted any real discussion of his past. "What happened to him?" Mia asked, with the guileless curiosity of a child. "Died. Heart attack. Year I graduated high school." Rex's knife was still. "Was supposed to go to college on a football scholarship, but..." He shrugged, a gesture that encompassed a world of pain and derailed plans. "Life happens." Evelyn understood. She'd seen it in the ER 100 times. Young men, their futures bright, knocked off course by tragedy and left adrift. "Is that when you joined the Army?" "Not right away. Spent a few years making a whole mess of bad choices first." Rex started carving again, the wolf's fur taking on a realistic texture under his blade. The army gave me a purpose, straightened me out. Best thing I ever did. And after the army? Evelyn's question was soft, but it hung in the air. Rex's hands went still again. Mia, sensing the shift in the emotional atmosphere, quickly changed the subject. Are you gonna carve his teeth next? They should be super sharp. That's the plan, little bird, Rex said, a grateful smile touching his lips. Sharp as needles. As he worked on the wolf's snarling mouth, Evelyn studied him. The harsh angles of his face seemed to soften in concentration, offering glimpses of the man beneath the armor. His hands, which she now knew could be impossibly gentle, moved with an artist's grace. Tell me about your daughter, she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. His knife skittered, leaving a tiny scar in the wood, a flaw he immediately began to smooth away. Her name was Lily, he said, his voice barely a whisper. She'd be 12 this year. Mia looked up from her movie, her child's intuition telling her this was important. Did she like wolves? Loved 'em, Rek breathed. Always wanted a dog, a big one that looked like a wolf. I kept telling her, soon, baby girl, when I get back from this run, we'll go look. His jaw clenched. There's always a next time, until there isn't. Evelyn felt her own chest tighten. The accident. Drunk driver blew a red light. Rek's voice was flat, stripped of all emotion. I was 1,000 miles away, celebrating some club anniversary, playing dress-up outlaw while my daughter was dying. He looked at Evelyn, his eyes hollow. She asked for me, in the ambulance. The nurse told me later. She kept asking when her daddy was coming home. The silence in the room was a living thing, heavy with shared grief. Evelyn knew the particular agony of receiving that phone call, of the frantic, desperate drive, of arriving too late. Is that why you stopped? Mia's voice was small, but it cut through the heavy silence. When you found me. Rek finally looked at the little girl, this brave, perceptive child who had somehow seen the connection between his old wound and his new purpose. Yeah, he said, his voice thick. I couldn't save Lily, but I could save you. I'm glad you did, Mia said with simple, absolute finality. And I bet Lily is glad too. Rek blinked hard, his hands trembling as he set the carving knife down. The wooden wolf was almost finished, a powerful, beautiful thing, marred only by that one tiny scar. She would have liked you, he managed to say. You're brave in the same way she was. Evelyn watched them, and everything finally clicked into place. Rek's devotion to Mia wasn't just kindness, it was penance. It was a desperate, beautiful act of redemption. By protecting Mia, he was finally, in some small way, keeping his promise to Lily. Mr. Rex. Mia's voice was sleepy now, the long day catching up to her. When you finish the wolf, can you carve me something else? Anything, little bird. What do you want? A family? A mommy wolf and a daddy wolf and a little girl wolf. So they can all be together. Rek's bruised eyes met Evelyn's across the room. An unspoken understanding flowed between them, a recognition that this strange, makeshift arrangement of theirs was becoming something else entirely, something real, something that might just be worth fighting for. I think, Evelyn said softly, her voice catching, that is a wonderful idea. Rek picked up his knife. He went back to the wolf, his hands steady once more, carving a future out of a block of wood, one careful, deliberate stroke at a time. The note was tucked under the windshield wiper of his truck, a single folded piece of paper held in place by the morning dew. 3 words in a familiar, elegant script. Time for a talk. Below them, an address for an abandoned warehouse district by the rail yard. No signature. None was needed. Rek would know Cobra's handwriting in his sleep. He crumpled the note, his knuckles white, and scanned the parking garage. They'd found him. After 8 months of living like a ghost, the Vulture Syndicate had finally sniffed him out. The timing was a kick in the teeth. Just when Mia was healing, when Evelyn was starting to let her guard down, when the quiet evenings had started to feel less like a temporary truce and more like a life. He drove to the meet, the old familiar dread coiling in his stomach. The warehouse loomed in the industrial twilight, a skeletal wreck of corrugated steel and broken windows. 5 Harleys were parked out front, their chrome winking like predators' eyes in the fading light. He recognized every single bike. Silas Cobra Vance stood near the entrance, a silhouette of power and menace. Even in his 50s, Cobra moved with the fluid grace of the snake he was named for. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly slicked back, his leather cut pristine, the club patches a declaration of war against the civilized world. Rek, Cobra's voice was smooth, like whiskey over gravel. You're looking domestic. Rek dismounted, keeping his hands open and away from his body. The other members, Snake, Hammer, Diesel, and Ghost, fanned out, a silent, intimidating crescent. These men had been his brothers, men he'd bled with and for. Now, they looked at him with the cold eyes of strangers. Cobra, Rek's tone was flat. Didn't figure you for a social call. This isn't social, Cobra said, a smile that never reached his eyes playing on his lips. Word on the street is you've been playing house. A pretty doctor and a broken little girl, playing the hero. That right? Rek's body went rigid. My life is my own now. See, that's where you're mistaken, brother, Cobra purred, stepping closer. You never just walk away. Blood in, blood out. You took an oath. I remember the oath. I also remember a time when family didn't mean preying on civilians. Snake, a wiry man with soulless eyes, let out a harsh laugh. Listen to him, boss. Got himself a conscience. Shut it, Snake. Cobra's focus was locked on Rek. Here's the situation, Rek. The feds are sniffing around, asking a lot of questions about some of our old business. Your name has a funny way of popping up. Seems a disgruntled former enforcer might be a very valuable witness for them. Ice flooded Rek's veins. I haven't talked to anyone. Not yet, Cobra conceded. But a man with something to lose, a man with a new family he wants to protect. That man is a liability. That man might be tempted to cut a deal to keep them safe. You know me better than that. I knew Rek, Cobra corrected him. This Rex Callahan, playing daddy to some other man's kid? I don't know him at all. Hammer, a giant of a man who had once been Rek's closest friend in the club, spoke up hesitantly. Cobra, maybe you should shut your mouth before I shut it for you, Cobra snapped, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. He turned back to Rek. Here's the deal. You're coming back. We have a piece of business down in Phoenix, and it requires your unique talents for persuasion. You're going to ride with us tonight and prove your loyalty is still with this family. I'm done with that life. No, you're not. Because if you refuse, then I'm going to have to pay a little visit to your new family. The doctor... Evelyn, is it? And the little girl... Cobra made a show of checking his phone. Mia, age 7, room 314 at Desert View General. It's so easy to get into hospitals these days. Rek's vision tunneled, a red haze descending over his world. You stay the hell away from them. Then come home, brother, Cobra said, his voice dropping to a seductive whisper. Come home where you belong. The threat was a physical thing, suffocating the air around them. Rek saw his choice with horrifying clarity. Return to the hell he'd barely escaped, or watch it consume the only two innocent people in his life. I need to think. You have 24 hours. Cobra held up his phone. On the screen was a picture taken that morning. Evelyn, walking to her car, completely unaware she was being hunted. After that, we stop asking nicely. The vultures mounted their bikes, the synchronized roar of their engines an anthem of impending doom. Before putting on his helmet, Cobra looked back at Rek. You were the best we ever had, man. A true artist of violence. It'd be a damn shame to see that talent go to waste. As their taillights vanished into the industrial gloom, Rek stood alone, the crumpled note in his hand feeling like a death sentence. He thought of Mia's trust, of Evelyn's hesitant smiles, of the unfinished wooden wolves on his workbench, and he thought of Cobra's reptilian eyes and the cold certainty that he never, ever bluffed. His phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. Mia's asking for you. Hope everything is okay. Everything was not okay. In 24 hours he would have to choose between the family he had built and the one that was determined to burn it all down. The cabin was his sanctuary, a place tucked away in the Gila National Forest, accessible only by a forgotten logging road. He'd built it with his own hands years ago, a place to escape the club, a place where the noise of his life couldn't follow. Now, it might be the only place on earth that could keep them safe. The keys felt like lead weights in his palm as he stood on Evelyn's doorstep before dawn. He watched her expression shift from sleepy confusion to sharp, adrenaline-fueled fear as he laid out the situation in stark, clipped sentences. You want us to do what? Evelyn's voice was a strained whisper, her eyes wide with disbelief. Just for a few days, until I can handle this, Rek said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He held up the cabin keys. It's remote, safe. They'll never find it. Mia appeared in the doorway, balancing on her crutches, her face a mask of sleepy curiosity. Are we going on a trip? Evelyn's protective instincts overrode her fear. Yes, sweetie. Go pack your backpack. Just your favorite books and Barnaby. We're going on a little adventure. Is Mr. Rex coming with us? Mia asked, her eyes finding Rek. He knelt down to her level. I'll get you there, but then I have to go take care of some grown-up business. Bad business? She asked, her perception unnervingly sharp. Just business, he said, forcing a smile. The drive was 2 hours of tense silence, Evelyn following Rek's motorcycle as he led them deeper into the mountains. When they finally arrived, Mia's gasp of delight was a small, bright sound in the heavy atmosphere. It's a log cabin, like in the books. Inside, the cabin was simple but solid. A large stone fireplace was the heart of the main room, flanked by shelves overflowing with books on history and woodworking. A small, efficient kitchen looked out over a sea of pine trees. You built this? Evelyn asked, running a hand over the smooth, hand-hewn banister. Most of it, Rek said, setting their bags down. Took a few summers. Mia, you can have the loft. There's a skylight right over the bed for stargazing. Evelyn did a quick professional sweep of the property, checking the locks, noting the well-stocked pantry and the landline phone. How long do we stay? As long as it takes. Rek's voice was grim. There's food for a month, a generator for power, and the closest neighbor is 10 miles away. That evening, after Mia had fallen asleep in the loft, exhausted from the day's events, Rek and Evelyn sat by the cold fireplace, the unspoken dread a third presence in the room. What is the plan, Rex? She asked. I go back, he said simply. I meet with him. I end this. And if you can't? The question was a terrifying whisper. Rek stared into the darkness outside the window. Then you and Mia stay here. As long as you need to. The place is yours. He gestured to a drawer in the kitchen. There's an envelope in there. The deed, title, everything. It's all in your name. I had it drawn up a few weeks ago. Evelyn stared at him, stunned. Why? Why would you do that? Because Mia deserves a safe place, he said, his voice raw. Because you gave me a reason to be a better man, because for the first time since Lily, I know what's worth fighting for. From the loft above, they could hear Mia talking in her sleep. A soft, innocent sound that was a world away from the ugly reality they were facing. Promise me something, Evelyn said, her voice tight. Anything. Promise me you'll come back. She can't lose someone else. I can't. Rek finally met her gaze, his eyes full of a terrible sorrow. I promise I'll try. That's not good enough, Rex. It's the only promise I can make that I know I won't break. He stood and walked to the door, his motorcycle keys in his hand. He paused, his back to her. Lock this door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me. If I'm not back in 48 hours, burn the envelope and disappear. He was gone before she could say another word, the roar of his Harley a lonely, fading cry in the vast mountain silence, leaving her and Mia in a beautiful wooden cage, waiting to see if their protector would ever return. Jake's confession was written under the dim light of a desk lamp in Marcus's quiet study. The pen felt unnatural in his hand, a flimsy tool to convey the weight of a lifetime of violent certainties and newfound fragile hopes. 3 pages, filled with everything he couldn't trust his own voice to say. My dearest Sarah and Emma, it began. If you are reading this, it means the promise I made to come back was one I couldn't keep. It means the past finally caught up, and this time I couldn't outrun it. He paused, the image of Emma sleeping peacefully in the guest room, her hand clutching Mr. Patch's, burning in his mind. Next door, Sarah was finally getting a few hours of restless sleep. Sarah, you looked at a monster and saw a man. You trusted me when you had every reason to run, and in doing so, you gave me a gift I never thought I'd deserve, a second chance. Please know that the only reason I would ever leave you is to make sure the life I lived before we met can never touch you or Emma. Your safety is the only thing that matters more to me than my own life. His throat constricted as he wrote, pouring out the story he had kept locked away. He wrote about Lily, about the soul-crushing guilt that had been his only companion for 5 years. He wrote about the vultures, not to make excuses, but to explain the brutal calculus of that world, how loyalty was a weapon and love was a weakness to be exploited. He detailed every financial arrangement he had made over the last 24 hours. The cabin was legally and irrevocably theirs. A trust fund, originally started for Lily, was now in Emma's name. Enough for college and a start in life. He was liquidating every asset he had to ensure his death would not leave them destitute. Emma, my brave, brave girl. You taught an old, broken soldier what it means to be strong. You looked at me with no fear, and you chose me. You made me want to be the man you thought I was. The wooden family I was carving for you is still unfinished on the workbench. Maybe that's for the best. Some things are more perfect when we imagine them ourselves. Be good for your Aunt Sarah. Protect her heart. It's the most precious thing in the world. He sealed the letter in an envelope, writing their names on the front. He left it in the center of Marcus's desk, a final testament to the family he had found and was now preparing to die for. Dawn was a pale, bloody smear on the horizon as he prepped his motorcycle. Marcus came out of the house with 2 mugs of coffee and the Kevlar-lined tactical vest Jake had asked for. "You're sure about this?" Marcus asked, his expression grim. He was a Marine, through and through. He understood the grim logic of sacrifice plays. "It's the only way to sever the connection," Jake said, checking the action on the .45 he hadn't carried in years. "If they think I'm dead, They have no more reason to care about Sarah and Emma. The threat dies with me. And if it goes the other way, then I'll be back for dinner." The lie tasted like ash in his mouth. "The location?" "The old quarry off 281. It's isolated, a kill box, but it contains the problem." Marcus nodded slowly. "What do you want me to tell them if you're not back?" Jake swung his leg over the Harley. "Tell them I kept my promise. Tell them I tried." He fired up the engine, the roar a defiant challenge to the quiet morning. He had called Viper an hour before, agreeing to a noon meeting to rejoin the club. It was a trap, and they both knew it. He rode away from the ranch without a backward glance. He couldn't afford to see their faces, to let the image of the life he was giving up weaken his resolve. The letter on the desk said it all. He was riding toward his own execution. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't running from his past. He was facing it head-on, using his own damnation as a shield to protect the two people who had become his salvation. The road stretched out before him, a black ribbon leading to a final, bloody reckoning. The quarry was a gaping wound in the earth, a place of dust and rock and bad memories. Viper stood in the center, flanked by his most loyal enforcers. He was smiling, a predator's grin that promised pain. "Reaper," Viper's voice echoed off the rock walls. "Welcome home." "This isn't a homecoming, Viper," Jake said, dismounting slowly, his hands in plain sight. "This is an ending." The fight was brutal, a whirlwind of fists and fury. It wasn't a brawl, it was an execution. Jake fought with the desperate strength of a man with everything to lose, but he was outnumbered and outmatched. He took down Snake and Diesel, his military training giving him a deadly efficiency, but a blow from Hammer sent him staggering, and Viper was on him in an instant, a knife flashing in the sun. Pain exploded in his side, hot and sharp. He went down, the dust of the quarry filling his mouth. Viper stood over him, the bloody knife in his hand. "You see," Viper panted, his face contorted with rage. "You never leave the family. The family is forever." Jake looked up, not at Viper, but past him, toward the ridge of the quarry, a faint glint of light. A scope. Marcus. "You're right," Jake coughed, blood speckling his lips. "Family is forever." He looked directly into Viper's eyes. "And you should never, ever threaten a Marine's family." The crack of the rifle shot was a sharp, clean sound that cut through the tension. Viper's eyes went wide with surprise, a perfect red circle appearing on his forehead before he crumpled to the ground. The remaining vultures stared, stunned, first at their fallen leader, then at Jake. From the ridge, Marcus stood up, his rifle held at the ready. He wasn't alone. With him were 3 other men, all carrying themselves with the unmistakable posture of combat veterans. Jake pushed himself to his feet, clutching his side. "It's over," he said to Hammer, his voice a ragged gasp. "Take him, bury him, and never come near my family again. The vultures died here today. Spread the word." Hammer, his face a mask of shock and a dawning understanding, simply nodded. He and the others lifted Viper's body and carried it to their bikes. They rode away without a backward glance, leaving Jake alone with his ghosts. Marcus and his friends were beside him moments later, patching his wound with a field dressing. "You took a hell of a risk calling me," Marcus said. "It wasn't a risk," Jake said, leaning against his friend. "It was faith. When they got back to the ranch, Sarah was waiting on the porch, the unread letter clutched in her hand. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with terror and relief. She ran to him, ignoring the blood, and threw her arms around him. "You promised," she sobbed into his shoulder. "You promised you'd try." "I kept my promise," he whispered, his face buried in her hair. Emma came out of the house then, her eyes taking in the scene. She walked slowly to Jake, her small face serious. She didn't say anything. She just reached out and took his free hand, her small fingers wrapping around his. It was a simple gesture, but it was everything. It was acceptance. It was home. It was the end of one life and the beginning of another. The family portrait on the mantel showed a man, a woman, and a young girl, all of them smiling, the kind of genuine, soul-deep smiles that can't be faked. It had been taken a year after the wedding, a small ceremony in Marcus's backyard. "Tell the story again," Emma, now 11 and on the cusp of her teenage years, said from the couch. It was their favorite ritual. Jake, his hands now used for fixing fences and carving intricate wooden animals instead of breaking bones, smiled and pulled her close. "Well, it all started on a god-forsaken stretch of highway," he began. He told the story not of the violence and the fear, but of the choices. The choice to stop. The choice to help. The choice to stay. The choice to fight for a future instead of being consumed by a past. "Our family didn't start the usual way," Sarah would always add, her hand finding Jake's. "It started with a broken man, a grieving woman, and a little girl who was brave enough to trust a monster." "He wasn't a monster," Emma would correct her, every single time. "He was a soldier who forgot how to come home. We just had to show him the way." And that was the truth of it. What began as a story of redemption, a man's quest to atone for his sins, had become something far greater. It became a story about how family isn't just about the blood you share, but about the people you choose to bleed for. It's about finding the missing pieces of your own soul in the hearts of others, and having the courage to build something new, something stronger, something beautiful from the wreckage of what came before. What do you think is the true meaning of family? Is it biology, or is it choice? Let's talk about it in the comments below. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that it's never too late to change your road, to fight for a new destination. Thank you for watching. Make sure you're subscribed, because every one of us has a story of redemption waiting to be told.